and posting that to the Leap Texas YouTube channel and to the Leap Texas website. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn the presentation over to our presenters.
Thank you very much for coming. Hello.
So you've got two of us here with you today. I am Sarah Thurmond. I am assisting Dr. Patton with this presentation.
And I'm Barbara Patton. I teach at the University of Houston, Victoria, generally in the education department, but I've been able to go down and stairs, so to say, from where I usually teach and work with Sarah in the Success Center, which works with freshmen, and most of our freshmen have a lot of difficulties with just transitioning as well as with math skills. Sarah and I teach a connection class with the freshmen with their algebra, contemporary math, and I think she has finite math also. I haven't had that one. And we're going to share with you today some of the things that we've noticed and some of the, I guess maybe you can see the tricks that we've tried. We usually go, the students don't know what to really think about us. Sarah is much younger than I am. She's about like my granddaughter's age. So she's like their big sister. I'm more like their adopted grandmother, and they never know what to expect out of us because we think anyway, we have a great sense of humor. Sarah, you want to start now?
Yes. So what we're going to talk about today are the many camouflages of anxiety that we have seen with our students in our math-based freshman seminar class. We're going to start with the dictionary definition of anxiety. So with this, we just went to, oh, sorry guys, I hit the wrong button. Go back. We looked to Merriam-Webster about anxiety and what they had to say, and anxiety is, sorry, my computer decided to freeze up on me.
It's an uneasiness, nervousness, usually over an impending or an anticipated ill, a state of being anxious. And we definitely know that we see that. There's several others, and it's a strong desire, sometimes mixed with doubt, fear, and uneasiness.
There you go. Thank you, Dr. P. My computer had completely frozen, so I appreciate that.
Well, maybe it thinks it should freeze in this hot weather.
All right. So with that, knowing that anxiety is an uneasiness that students take with them into the classroom, what we want to look at is, one, how they camouflage that, because our students don't want to let us know that they're struggling with anxiety. So what we have found is that students like to hide, camouflage, mask their anxiety, and it comes across in multiple ways. One is poor communication. And this communication can then result in a lack of communication between student faculty. It can result in relationship issues, roommate conflicts. We'll also see that it comes across as assumptions. The students will make assumptions. The instructor doesn't like me, the tutor doesn't like me, they don't want to help me, things like that. We've also seen where students get their sleep cycles messed up, okay? So with the sleep cycle messed up, the student gets all thrown off because their brain can't shut down at night. They're worried about what's going to happen in class or what did happen in class, and they're unable to fall asleep at like a normal time, and that causes them to sleep in late in the morning, miss class. It can also result in depression, which makes them stay in bed. So they're staying in bed, but they're awake and they're not able to go to sleep. We've seen the lack of confidence from students. They don't want to get up and go to the whiteboard to work on problems. They don't want to speak up in class. There's also a lot of denial and masking that the students will do in our classes.
A lot will deny that they have any problems, and they will come across to us and try to convince us that they don't need to study. Oh, we don't need that. We are, when we're trying to go over problems, they're denying that they don't know it. And then a week or so later, we find out that if they did have a quiz in their class with their regular math professor, they're making like 20 or even lower than that. But see, with us, they're denying it. So they are so afraid of it, they're denying that they have any problem because they don't want to even get close to a math problem.
Exactly. We also see the denial as a lack of attendance. I didn't need to attend that class because I already know what's going on. Or they don't ask questions in class. We'll see students, they've got, it's, Dr. Patton found this cool word that accurately describes it, compunction, but it's remorse related to not being up to the task. And so they don't fully engage in the class, and that can mean completing the practice problems, communicating with other people in the class. Our classroom is pretty unique. We've got 3 walls covered in whiteboards, and the students will go up and work on problems a lot, and you'll see them, they'll get up and they'll talk, but they're not doing a whole lot of work on the whiteboard. We also get a lot of rationalizing. I've never been good at math. My instructor doesn't teach the way I learn. My mom can't do math, so I can't do math. And these are all ways that students hide their anxiety from us. Now, we know it's there. So what we're going to look at next is the results of a small sample survey we gave to the students, if my computer will transition slides for y'all. There we go. Okay, so
on the rationalizing, we even found research that said that some students are rationalizing as young as 5 that they can't do math because the family couldn't do it and one thing and another. So this is a big thing. So that by the time they get to us at 19, they're very, very perfected in that.
Definitely. Okay, so we've got the survey questionnaire that we gave to the students, and this is just a small sample survey. It was 25 questions that we used to gauge students' anxiety levels related to activities that are involved in a typical math class. And that was anything from signing up for the class, walking into the class, opening their textbook, being given assignments, things like that. And so when we went through the results of the questionnaire, we figured anything that was 50% of the respondents or higher indicated a high anxiety response rate. And we did this on a Likert scale, so they ranged 1 through 5, with 1 being not at all and 5 being very much. And so the results that came back as the highest causing anxiety situations for the students were studying for a math test and taking the math section of the college entrance exam. We used the Texas State Initiative, the TSI assessment, so that's what we gave to them. Taking a math exam, just an exam or a quiz, we saw that caused high anxiety. And then again with the final exam, being given a homework assignment with many difficult problems that's due at the next class meeting. And then we asked a series of questions about just thinking about an upcoming test, okay? So when students are thinking about an upcoming test, at 1 week before the test, the anxiety level was 40% of the class had high anxiety. But then as you went forward, 1 day before the test jumped up to 70%, and then 1 hour before the test jumped up to 80%. So their anxiety levels increase as the test gets closer. If they have to take a high number of math classes to fulfill their degree requirements, that also costs them a lot of anxiety. Opening up a math book and seeing a page full of problems, and then being given a pop quiz. All of these things cause a lot of stress and anxiety for our students. So that's one of the things we have to be cognizant of as we're teaching them. Did you want to add anything on that, Dr. Patton?
We really found that, like I said, like Sarah was talking, that the anxiety closer to a situation, the higher the anxiety. Of course, the way we gave our questionnaire, we could not tell who was taking it or put anything together, but it really appeared that almost all are really worried about math. And some of these in the survey were not ones that were TSI. So we see that the anxiety has not gone down as they master the class. Okay.
And I just want to let you know, I am seeing the questions pop up in the chat box, and I will answer them at the end along with Dr. Patton.
If I can find the chat box. Who has it and why? Well, in our situation with the freshmen, I would say about 99.9% of the ones have it. I only saw about 2 really in the last couple of years that I could say that didn't have it. And those students not only were fairly good in math, but they were so mature in their work habits that it was like night and day between them. So who has it? Almost all of them. Why? They have such a weak foundation is what we're getting. It is sad to think that they have this weak a foundation. On the questionnaire, we even had one that said, how do you feel if you have an addition problem on paper? And it had a lot of anxiety with that one. A lot of the students had anxiety if they saw an addition problem on paper. Sarah and I were kind of joking, wonder what we would have had the results if we would have said an addition problem mentally. I'm sure it would have been much higher. Sarah?
All right, so what we have found is that the lack of foundation that causes the anxiety for students is actually wrapped up in several different factors. And one of the factors that we found is the time frame for the work. And kind of just like us, there's not enough hours in the day. That's exactly how the students feel when they're given a math assignment, whether it's homework or a quiz or a test. There's just not enough work. The time frame allotted versus the number of questions or the complexity of the questions can really stress them out. And so one of the things we have found is that making sure we've got some of our remedies below, but making sure there's realistic expectations for the student. So while some of us who are more adept at math might be able to complete a 25 question test very easily in 50 minutes, that might not be realistic for the students, right? So we've got to couple the realistic expectations with the amount of time that we have in class, using that class time very wisely, giving the students time to think. They need time to think, and we have to remember that their level is very different than our level. Even if they've gone through and gotten 100 on the homework assignment, that doesn't necessarily mean it only took them 3 minutes to solve the problem. They might have needed 10 or even 15. So giving them that time to think and be realistic with it is extremely important.
We also found a couple of years ago, our seminar was scheduled right after or immediately following their math class. For instance, they had algebra with the professor from, say, 10 to 11, 15 or so, and then 10 minutes later they came into our seminar class. So they had math for about 3.5 hours straight. And we were seeing that they were so tired, they were just high-strung, everything. And so we begged and managed to get it, Sarah and I did, that they have their one class on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and they have the seminar on the opposite day, like we have ours Tuesdays and Thursdays. And we have seen a lot less anxiety with that, just that simple thing that they're not sitting there 4 hours or 3.5 hours. So timing is so important. And another thing we found, that we don't like classes over what they would call traditional lunch, because at one of the years they timed the class, which is over their lunch. It messed up the students going back to the dorm, to the dining room, and even though they're on their crazy other schedule, it just did not seem to fit. So your timing is so important. We can't overemphasize the timing and the time frame. Not only how much, when the class is, how long the class, but working with it within their life.
8 a.m. math classes, also not a good idea for most of our students. Remember, their sleep schedules are thrown off with general anxiety, and then coupled with math anxiety. If you put the class at 8 a.m. in the morning, there is a higher absence rate. All right. One of the other things we have found is that friends, family, and society play a big role in students' math anxiety. As educators, we know everyone has a different skill set. So trying to highlight those skills within the math class is extremely important. Praising students when they're doing something correctly or on the right track or just in the right direction. I do a lot of questioning with the students that tries to get them not only to think positively about themselves, but about the math in general, and trying to motivate them and keep them from getting discouraged. So if we're going through a problem, you know, I might ask them, what formulas do you have available? You know, what are the tools you have in your toolbox? Different things like that, because what they're hearing from everybody outside is that, oh, well, I didn't need math to be successful. You don't need math to be successful, right? But we know that they do. So trying to keep it as lighthearted and as friendly and encouraging as you can make it a little easier for them to tackle these things.
We have asked them at the beginning of our classes, like the beginning of the semester, excuse me, why would they need math? And then we've asked them again at the end. And it's amazing that they do start realizing they do need it. Or some didn't think they needed it at all. They're only taking it because they had to, according to their degree plan. Pamela, we have given them some links. We do give them a lot of links. Okay.
Sorry, I was catching up on the chat box. We've had a lot of questions.
The realistic expectations. I think some of these students have had unrealistic expectations, and they think we're going to continue that. So we tried to not necessarily be overly friendly with them, but we try to be very approachable, and we've even introduced something called Lunch and Learn, where we try to meet about once a week. And there's a little cubby hole, so to say, at the end of the hall by my office that we will set. We just take our lunch and sit, and if they want to join us and eat, they can, and work problems that way. And that has been extremely important, and helping them with some of their expectations, that they don't see us way up there and they're somewhere else. They see that we are human and we'll work with them. And I think that's helped a whole lot.
Also keeping everything in the proper order, not jumping straight to logarithmic functions without first having talked about rational expressions and fractional exponents, and different things like that can throw students off. We've seen that vocabulary itself is very difficult for the students to pick up. We live in an academic world where there's a lot of terminology that the students don't understand. So trying to keep everything in a logical format for the students to follow is something that they really need. So working your way from addition and subtraction to multiplication and division, and even just keeping that same order when you go into everything. So starting off with basic numbers, then moving to polynomials and different things. You know, if you keep everything in the same order, as far as we're going to start with the addition of polynomials and the subtraction of polynomials, multiplying, dividing, before you go into factoring, different things like that is really helpful for the students, just taking it one step at a time, just always reminding ourselves they don't know this yet. This is all new to them. And then really making those real world connections. That's so important with math in general, because you hear it all the time. When am I ever going to use this? Right? They always want to know that. When am I ever going to use this? And so one of the things we like to do is we find out what our students are interested in. We find out their hobbies, you know. So when we're doing word problems, we can base it off of things that they like and they understand, whether it's baseball, whether it's engineering. I had a student who really wanted to go into petroleum technology and finding examples and things that are based on their needs and rotating it without like leaving anybody out. I've related it to cheerleading, you know, different things that you can do to help the students figure out, like, wow, this really can be useful in my everyday world.
We also have a project with them. And so we let the students do a research project, and this connects a lot of the real world with them. This past time they looked at their career or their dream career, and they did a little bit of research, and they found out how it would connect with math and where they would need math with that career, as well as they built an office, a model office. It was a blueprint since we weren't able to actually get together that last part. So it really helped them learn and get with the real life. In that one particular one wanted to be a child psychiatrist or psychologist. And so when they were researching, they found out, you know, we've got to know how to build our office. We've got to know how we're going to build things, how we're going to work with our students as far as scheduling time and all this. So it had a lot of math in it that I don't think she really realized until she started researching. Did it freeze again, Sarah?
It doesn't, it moves on my screen, and then it's got about a 20-second delay for when it adjusts for y'all. So also the homework to test progression. We know that, you know, if we're talking to a student today about logarithms, testing them tomorrow doesn't give them enough time to go over the homework and review for it and then take the test. So making sure you give the students an adequate time frame to be able to really apply that learning, especially because we know how math goes and we know how the students think. And think to when you guys were in math classes or even teaching your math class, there's not always time to go over all the critical thinking that is needed to process the problems and really truly apply the formulas and different things you're learning. A lot of the times you're able to give the basics in the math class and teach students small portions about specifically using formulas, but then homework lets them start to learn to apply it. We really see, can you use it? Do you understand how to use it? You've got the quizzes that get a little more in depth, and then at the test, you're really truly checking their critical thinking. Can you apply this? Do you understand when you need to apply a specific formula, or, you know, do you need to combine multiple formulas or multiple techniques into solving one problem? And so if you move too quickly, they're not able to process and they don't have that time frame to be able to build those critical thinking skills. And so keeping that in mind is very important for their anxiety levels. Did you want to add anything, Dr. P?
I think we're working on this one. I think we pretty well got it taken care of. Any questions? Okay.
This is Dr. Patton's favorite slide. It's her cracked foundations. This is where the student, we see most of the issues with the students. So I'll let her go through this one.
Those basic skills, and it is so scary because if they see a fraction and maybe a fraction over a fraction, and we try to break it down into parts and show them how to do it, they don't need that because it's this other problem. But they don't understand you have to go at the bottom of the ladder, so to say, to get these. And this is so important, and we talk and talk, but we're working on it. But if you can't do the bottom, you can't do the rest. And one of the big problems I find is that elementary teachers, and we can't knock them a lot, but they don't use the right terminology, and then the students get mixed up because they don't know, for instance, the denominator, the numerator. They think it's a top and a bottom. They don't realize that they have a reason. And if you're simply going to multiply or divide fractions, when you're talking, you have to know what is the numerator and what's the denominator, and they don't do. Another thing that students do not like to do, and I keep telling them that if you will just learn, especially if it's a multi-choice test, you can almost always do a good job, is estimation skills. And they just fight me all the way until you can show them a lot of examples. For instance, front end estimation and things, and some do not. I had a young student teacher come back to me just this few days ago, and she was taken out of her class that she taught last semester because she was teaching decimals wrong, according to the coach. According to the school district coach, she didn't need to teach anything about where lining up decimals, anything like that, because they have a calculator. They don't need to worry with it. And my student, former student, was trying to really get the students to understand, have a good understanding of decimals. So, you know, we have a big thing, but we need to estimate. If these students aren't doing anything, there's a big difference in 3.8 and 38. So they have to learn what's real, what is possible on these. And I'm sure you've seen many of those things that sometimes it's not possible to do that. Estimation. And I also share with them, at one time I taught at a technical school, and I had my diesel mechanic guys that I love dearly, and I got them to learn to do estimation and the quadratic formula. And almost all of them passed their test, their state test, as a result. Some of them had taken it 2 and 3 times. But after we worked with those 2 things, they were acing it. So I'm a firm believer in estimation. This is one of my favorites. I love this bird. Go ahead, Sarah. You can talk about my little bird.
All right. So one of the biggest anxiety factors we've seen with the students is their professor. And most of this comes back to how they camouflage their anxiety with those communication issues and making those assumptions, is that they don't always figure out that their instructors are trying to help them. So sometimes if the instructor talks too fast or we can't all be super bubbly and awesome like Dr. Patton, right? And so sometimes when you're up front, when you're up at the front of the classroom, we have to remember that's a long way away from where that student is sitting. And there's a lot of things the students are assuming and inferring in that distance. And so trying to make sure that you're keeping your expectations realistic, you're staying positive, asking them, do they understand? Do they have any questions? Giving them that time to process the information you've just given them. And I know when we're teaching classes and we have all these demands and all these requirements, we need to cover all these things. And you're like, okay, I have to cover all these things. I have 2 hours a week. This is what I've got to cover every single day. And so we have this schedule that we've lined out to make sure that we can cover everything we need to cover. But we have to remember that the information is new to the students. And so trying to sometimes slow down, and I love to talk fast, and my students will tell you they hate me when it comes to talking about fractions, because I walk into the classroom and I'm like, guess what we're doing today? And they're like, oh God. And I'm like, that's right, we're doing fractions. And I get so excited about it. I just love them. And so while I'm super positive and super pumped, I have to remember I've got to slow down, because I may want to cover 50 problems that day, and the students are like, whoa, I need 5 because I don't get this. And so just making sure we're giving them the time, and then also really letting them know that you care about their progress in the class. And that can be, it can be so simple as a self-examination of how the students are doing. Maybe you gave them a pop quiz and they all failed. So instead of just being like, oh, they all failed, oh well, you know, maybe there was something we needed to go back and explain differently or explain a little better, giving them some different examples, making sure that it's not just like, okay, they failed, let's move on, let's keep going. Saying, okay, let's go back over this, guys. I noticed we didn't do so hot on this. Sometimes the best things we can do is throw out a pop quiz and try again the next day, because something was, there was a disconnect somewhere. And that really lets the students know, like, you're not just there to regurgitate information. You're really trying to help them learn, and that goes a long way in their eyes.
Another thing that goes a long, long way is if the class in general seems not to understand, and you give a quiz, maybe 1 or 2 problems, and try to find out, and you see that, say, 80% didn't do very well, if you'll say that, you know, y'all didn't do very well, maybe it was that I didn't explain it right. Let's go back over it. Maybe it was the way I explained it. Maybe I can do it another way. Because obviously if 80% didn't understand, something was missing in that communication. I'm not saying they weren't, a few of them weren't playing on their phones and things like that, but you can't blame 80% of them all on the students. You have to, the professor himself, herself, has to accept some responsibility that maybe they just didn't talk the right lingo, and you've got to go back. And if you'll tell the students, maybe I didn't explain it right, you know, this is common to me, maybe I went over it too fast, maybe I said words that you didn't understand that are so common to me I didn't think about it. That'll mean a whole lot, and then you usually can get back on a good footing and go from there.
The same with providing additional materials and methods. So like, we know a lot of the topics we're covering in math, and I saw some, Pamela was posting about chemistry. Chemistry is extremely difficult for a lot of our students, and not all schools have the proper prereqs for chemistry. That's just me speaking as a success coach and advisor. So not everybody is going to be necessarily prepared for the class. Sometimes it has absolutely nothing to do with us not explaining something properly or going too fast. Sometimes we have to catch them up, right, and get them on speed for where we need them to be. So giving them additional materials and methods to study something. I know in my class Blackboard and Dr. Patton's as well, we have a math resources page, and it's good places for them to go to get help with math. And for each section that we cover, we supply additional resources. So in addition to what they're hearing from us, you know, we'll go online and we'll find things that we think are going to be helpful to the students, because sometimes they need to hear it more than once or multiple different ways. Sometimes they've got to read and hear in different things, and that's going to be the case for math, chemistry, physics, and pretty much any subject students struggle with. It's not even just the STEM field. I needed that for English, I won't lie.
Sarah and I really needed for spelling. We've decided math people can't spell. But admitting to your students that you're not perfect does go a long ways. And as Sarah said, sometimes they just don't have that background. So we have to work on building the foundation. And it's not us, it's just that they didn't get it. And we can't say, oh, your high school teacher didn't teach that. Maybe they didn't have the background below that. So we just quit saying that so-and-so did. Quit trying to put the blame on somebody. Just look at the foundation, see what they need, and go from there. Because we can hunt reasons all day long. This is one of our favorites. Long-term effects of the math anxiety. Whether they're 18 or 81, if they don't know a little bit of math, they're going to be in trouble. And I'm sure with the pandemic, you know a lot of it, because as simple as buying groceries and trying to plan ahead, they've got to have math, and they need to not be so anxious about it. What happens if it persists? What will happen? Well, we'll have a lot of things that we're going to have the avoidance of STEM. We're not going to have STEM people in our things.
We see the avoidance of classes, avoidance of STEM majors. We see students that if they know math, like strong math skills are a requirement for their degree program, they're just like, nope, not gonna do it. We had one young man who was an athlete, and he really wanted to be a orthopedic surgeon for sports. He figured out, I can't do the math. I think he would have probably been an excellent one. He had excellent communication skills as far as humor and getting along with things, but because he had such a poor feeling of math, he just couldn't do it. So what did he do? He dropped out and told us he was going to the military. And I'm not saying the military was bad, but I think we lost a good possible surgeon. Just like Dr. Patton's example earlier, we find a dependence on calculators. Students lose the ability to do calculations in their head, and they start depending on calculators or other equipment. I'll give a shout out to my grandpa, who was a surveyor, and he built airports and different things, and he was able to do the calculations and different things for angles and measurements in his head or with a pad and paper. And he had young people coming up, and he was training them, and they're sitting there using calculators or different devices, and they've got to measure and do things, and they're like, hold on, I'll be there in a second. And he was like, I'm done. And so we're losing a lot of time and skilled workforce because there's so much reliance on different technology to be able to do the calculations or the estimation. It doesn't even have to necessarily be a complete calculation for what we're trying to complete. And that's one of the big things is that we saw, and it was a survey. It was an employment survey for a skilled workforce. I don't remember the exact name of the survey, but we're looking at a less skilled workforce, and there was increased stress when they surveyed people because people felt they were not prepared to do the jobs they were going to be hired for. They didn't feel like they had the required background to complete their jobs because they saw that it needed math or science background. They're also seeing shortages for employees with these backgrounds, and so we have open needs for our students to go into the workforce.
You know, as simple as addition, and we were talking about averaging grades is what we were doing in my class, and I was talking to them about doing a long line of numbers and adding them, and I was talking about grouping them so that they could kind of group them in 10s or 20s and then put them together. But they honestly believed that they had to add exactly in order. They could not believe that you could hop around, is what I call it, to where I can group them and they fit together to me and they would make an easier number to add and work with. They just could not believe little things like that. And I thought, you know, the calculator has done that to a degree, but yet why aren't they taught little things that would help them not be so anxious about it? After that, they started saying, oh, I can do that. That'll work, you know, and going. But it's really sad that they feel like they have to do things in such a rigid order. And I've been in education a long time, and I don't know where they're getting it. But some of these students honestly believe that if they don't do it exactly, yes, we have to do, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, in order. But a lot of these others we don't have to do in a specific order. For instance, to find the area of a rectangle, length times width, I told them, what's the big deal? Do width times length. You get the same number. And they're going like, you know, you can learn little things like that. I don't know why they have to be so rigid. But some people do. So I guess it's a reason. Sarah?
I think you got it, Dr. P.
Do we have any questions?
I'm going to pull up the chat because I don't want y'all to think we were ignoring you, but
I'll admit I did because I don't see the chat box. I'm from old school and I don't see a lot of tech stuff.
All right, so one of the questions was, have we been able to separate weak math skills from the ability to transfer math skills to other areas? And I think Pamela was talking about chemistry later in some of her questions. So I don't know that we've necessarily been able to separate the weak math skills from the ability to transfer. If math skills are required for the course, we've seen that if a student struggles with math and they have a cracked foundation, so to speak, they're not just going to struggle with the actual math class. They're going to struggle with math, chemistry, physics, some of their genetic biology classes that require math skills. So not so much a separation, but a continuation of struggles with anything that requires some kind of math background. And I see that a couple people asked for a copy of the survey. Yes, we will get those to Jeff so that along with our slides so that you guys have access to that.
Our survey was not, some of it's original, but most of it was things we found in research, talking about anxiety. So we've adapted a little bit so it helps us.
Yeah.
Or more for us. We'll be glad to send that to you and share with it. The impact of teaching methods, we try to do it. We've tried to do a lot of hands-on and working rather than just strictly abstract. And some of that we have seen that it's helped, but I don't know.
A lot of with the teaching methods, especially with this class and this population, has kind of been trial and error and a formulation of what fits our students. We've learned that some projects work, some projects don't. We've even had weird semesters where you have to have different teaching methods based on the class. Like sometimes a teaching method that works for one class doesn't work for the other just because of either the topic, like Dr. Patton was saying, our classes are paired with college algebra, contemporary math, and finite. So what we do in one class doesn't always transition to the other one.
An example of that is one year we did a project and it worked beautifully. The next time we did it, it was with a different group and was with another math class, even though it was a freshman connect class. And one of them told us that when we got to know this particular young lady well enough that we felt like she didn't feel intimidated and she would be real honest with us. She says it didn't connect. I enjoyed doing it, but it didn't connect with what our other math professor was doing. We thought it did. So you have to talk to the students and find out things so you don't keep, if you did it wrong, don't keep doing it. Try something else.
I see that there was a question about offering presentations about how math links to jobs help as motivation, and the answer to that is yes. Finding, we found some TED Talks online that have worked. We even had a guest speaker, DJ Spooky. I don't know if y'all have heard of him, but DJ Spooky, he does music records, and he uses mathematical formulas and things that he's found related. He spent, what was it, Dr. Patton, 2 weeks in Alaska.
Something about in Antarctica.
Oh yeah, Antarctica, and he used the calculations found from the ice formations to make an entire music record. Our students loved that. They loved it because so many of them are interested in the arts. So if you can find guest speakers, we've brought in career services. Anybody that's gonna help the students actually see how math relates to their jobs. Bringing in engineers is awesome. All of that is really good. And there's a question about how do you engage the conversation, or how do you engage students in the conversation to see the need for math, giving them those outside resources, giving them the TED Talks, bringing in guest speakers, really letting them see what outside careers look like and how they use math, and having them say, even just, I had an English teacher come in one time and say, you know, you have to calculate grades, and students will ask you on the spot, what's my grade? And I can't always pull up Blackboard to see it written out. You know, like even bringing in people from non-STEM fields, letting them see that there's math in non-STEM fields and how that looks and what that looks like is nice, because we know, at least for us, our students are taking the core level math class. This might be the only math class they need, but having people come in and talk about how math is really used in the real world is awesome for the students. Do you guys have any other questions? If not, then what we'll do, we'll share our contact information. Please write it down. We love getting questions. We don't mind answering about some of the things we've done in our class to try to help students. Or if you guys have ideas,
we can share with you some of the things that we've done that didn't work, yeah, as well as we'll be glad to share with some of the things that did work. And we've had both ends of the spectrum, right, Sarah?
Definitely. And please, like I said, if you have something that you want to share with us, by all means, copy down our contact information and send us some of your best practices, because this presentation is by no means the end-all be-all of what's out there, or how students camouflage their anxiety, or how you can cope with it. So we love to learn new things too.
And the anxiety probably in the fall is going to be extremely high. We don't know what we're going to do. We don't know if we're going to be on campus, on Zoom or Teams. We just don't know. So it's going to be probably more of a challenge this fall than it has been in the past with anxiety. So we're really going to have to all band together and help our students. The students at this age in their life, they really can't lose like a year to 2 years in their education development. So it's really going to put a lot of them behind. So let's all band together and try to help them.
I don't know if y'all can hear me. My mic doesn't always come back sometimes.
We can hear you.
Oh, good. Well, thank you both so much for the presentation today. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording now.